What are your thoughts on the differences between knowing and doing, or understanding and practicing when it comes to servant leadership?
The differences between knowing and doing, or understanding and practicing in servant leadership, become pretty profound in our day and age, especially when you consider that we live in a fast-paced, please give it to me now society a lot of times. But the great works of all nations and all societies have always taken time. And I think servant leadership is one of those. That is one of the great works, one of the great understandings, and one of the great deeds of any given society is servant leadership, and it takes time. So again, I come to that from a perspective of psychology and also theology. In both perspectives, there's an attendant desire to notice the mystery when we talk about depth psychology. Carl Jung, Viktor Frankl, some of the existentialist psychologists, some of the just basic Jungian analysts, we have this focus on the mystery that helps us notice this is pretty serious, this thing that we're going towards. And if it's servant leadership, Jung would say that's one of the great archetypes, I think, even though maybe the term wasn't directly available when he was speaking and writing. I think he would say it's one of the most profound, powerful archetypes. I think he would also then say that servant leadership, like we notice in society, is going to immediately, at its best forms, have some grasp of the fact that there's a deep shadow to leadership. That we can't just go, yes, let's all be servant leaders, and suddenly it happens. That pretty much Carl Jung and other great thinkers like Frankl and like Dietrich Bonhoeffer, if we go over to theology, and Paul Tillich and some of the people that I've loved as far as my readings growing up. I think C.S. Lewis, if we think about his book, Till We Have Faces, there's going to be a deep knowledge of the fact that leadership doesn't just exist as I say it and then we go do it, or we all say, yes, we love servant leadership, and then it happens. There's some long-term attendant necessity in there to deal with the darkness or the shadow of leadership, the darkness or the shadow of serving. And I think if we just point at those a little bit, we can see the darkness or the shadow of serving might have something to do with codependency, or the overwillingness to make sure I don't use any power. If we think about the shadow of serving. The shadow of leadership might be the overwillingness to use power. I think servant leadership is a beautiful nexus of those, like understanding the darkness of both sides, ingesting it from a Jungian perspective, or embracing it, not running from it, not fleeing or blocking it, and then trying to move together with others toward a deeper understanding that would then create a deeper action, a deeper way of enacting and living in servant leadership. So when I think about that, and I think about character in psychological development, we know from research that it takes 3 to 5 years to change a person's character, for a person to surrender enough to change their own character. And then if we kind of put that out to a collective group or an organization, how long does it take for an organization to change from a non-servant-led organization to a fully servant-led organization? I don't know, but it would be at least 3 to 5 years. And so I'm sure we could say longer. In family systems therapy, they say to change a generational family system, it takes about 15 years from the point of brokenness, the point of total surrender, into the desire for the deeper change. That's why transitional figures in generational lines are so important. So instead of alcoholism, 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 sobriety, new depth of life, that's going to change the generational structure. So if we look at organizations, instead of over-ambition, over-dominance, over-use of power down through the generations of an organization, we need a transitional generation. Servant leadership, critical density, critical mass, tipping point over into the new thing. And that's going to involve a lot of depth of understanding different parts of the shadow. I think Martin Luther King Jr. said it best for me when he talked about that there's always a need for a balance of love and power. That love without power, he called it anemic and weak, basically ineffectual. I think we've all witnessed that or been a part of it or done it ourselves. And then he said power without love, dictatorship, totalitarian, harms people, abusive. The two together, love and power, that's the legitimate way of life. And that's what servant leadership is about.